Welcome to Cycle Breakers and Moneymakers, a podcast for women of color and first gen who are breaking generational cycles and glass ceilings by going places no one before them has ever gone. I'm your host, leadership coach, and eldest daughter of immigrants, Mariela De La Mora. I left a 16-year marketing career to create a multiple six-figure-a-year coaching business as a single mom. Each week, you'll learn how to build unshakable self-trust, become in demand, lead with confidence, and make more money by being more of who you are.
Hey everyone. So I can already tell you now, this is going to be like the heart and soul of what I do. Literally, this episode is why my business exists. And it is really about the purpose behind my work, which essentially is helping daughters of immigrants to be able to create more money, more opportunities, more visibility by being more of who they are. But what holds us back is a lot of our conditioning, survival mode conditioning that we grew up with as daughters of immigrants. And I have been studying us for the last 5 years, like deeply, not just through my own healing journey, but through coaching over 100 daughters of immigrants and doing 4.5 years now of one-on-one coaching where I'm really going deep and working with a lot of different daughters of immigrants, different countries of origin, like purely life coaching, business coaching, leadership coaching, and really just seeing what comes up. And we have so many strengths. We have so many gifts, and those are very present in our business, right? Like you cannot outwork us. Like we do not have a work ethic problem. Like we have ridiculously high standards. We care so deeply. We are empathetic, and we use many of those gifts against ourselves because of what I'm going to talk about in today's episode. And I hope that no matter where you are, no matter who you are, no matter your journey, whether you have a job, whether you are in the beginning stages of your business, whether you are very established in your business, like I coach on some of these things with clients of mine who are at multiple six-figure level, 7 figures. Like I've been a leadership coach to women with $1 million businesses. And these things still ring true, and it is absolutely part of your journey in creating more than like your parents or ancestors ever could have thought, because this is actually the unlearning and the healing that is required to create these things. And so this is, I would say, almost a love letter, but also like just a bit of a validation for maybe many of the things that you are experiencing but don't realize. You just think it's who you are, or you think it's how you are, or you are aware of it, but you think it's just you, and you're holding it against yourself. And so I really hope today's episode will help you see yourself in some of these and be able to just recognize the gifts that you have that are actually underneath some of this heaviness. So essentially in this episode, I'm going to talk about patterns that hold daughters of immigrants back in entrepreneurship and in leadership, just anything that requires more visibility, where it comes from and why it makes sense, and new ways of seeing these things as just protective responses, as just patterns versus an actual reality, versus it meaning anything about you or your capability, so that you can hopefully relieve yourself from holding some of these things or seeing them as being your fault or seeing them as things that are only happening to you. And at the end, I'm going to share ways to work with me if you find that I am speaking to you directly and that you're experiencing some of these right now, because I work with women in all capacities, not just under the guise of like business coaching, right? I coach on everything. I'm a mentor. So whether it's life or business or anything, life expansion, pivots, all the things, like I am the first gen coach. I am the first gen coach. I have studied us. I love us. I think that we can change the world if they put us all in a room, especially eldest daughters. Like we would solve so many problems and get things done. And I just want us to thrive. And that is why I'm here. So this is today's episode. So sending y'all so much love, even just before diving in. I love you all so much. So I'll just open with a little bit of a story so that you understand why I even started getting curious about speaking to first gen in particular as a coach. I was someone who I achieved it all. I achieved everything. I was the kid that was the eldest daughter. I have 2 little sisters. My parents immigrated from Mexico. but I was born in San Francisco and I have two little sisters. Growing up, I was like, I got good grades. I did what I was supposed to do. I would do my own homework and nobody could really help you at a certain point when you're a daughter of immigrants. And so I was the kid that like came home, did my homework in 15 minutes. When my little sisters were born, I was like helping my mom, helping to take care of them. I took care of myself. I had a high GPA. When I went to college, I tried to almost beat myself in terms of trying to get the best GPA and just do everything right. Same thing in corporate. I went in and I started in marketing. I graduated in 2003, went straight into marketing and was like, I want to climb the ladder. I was always raised that you need to be the hardest worker in the room, right? That's something that I learned from my dad. My dad worked at the same company from 1976 until he graduated, until he retired in like 2022, I think. So he was at the same company for decades. And I remember him being like, even though I've been there for 40 years, I still show up half an hour early. I put my uniform on and I just work hard, and that's what you got to do because you never know if the companies are ever laying off, like they're going to want to keep like the hardest working people. So I always was like, you have to work harder than anybody else in the room. And guess what that gets you in corporate is, yes, it often does get you promoted. I got promoted because I just had a big mouth and I was like a pain in the ass and I advocated for myself and my money and me getting promoted and all of that. But for many of us who are used to just like being the hardest worker in the room, oftentimes it just gives you more responsibilities and not necessarily more pay. It gets you burnt out. Same thing in business. Like you're just doing the most, right? But I don't know, for some reason, never had a problem with being a pain in the ass and getting my money and getting my promotion and documenting what I was doing and being like, here's the job responsibilities that I'm actually doing versus what you're paying me. And this is what it is in the market. And so I climbed the ladder and I became a marketing director. And I was generally like the youngest person. So it got me up the ladder. It got me these prestigious jobs and like all of this job experience and skill sets as a marketer and in hiring and growing teams. But something about when I decided to leave that behind, when I was like, do I want to keep climbing the ladder? I have so much responsibility now that I became a parent. I was a single parent. Unexpectedly, I'm a single parent. And so I left it behind. And because it's at a certain level, like you're just doing so much work. There was just no light work for me in my career as a marketer. So I started my coaching business and I just remember, and I still had my job. I still had my job for a while, right? And I was trying to grow it. And I was like, what the hell is happening? I feel like I have not felt this level of like fear, like imposter syndrome, being in my head, like comparing myself, like wondering. And I just was like, what is going on? Because it felt, of course I had felt this way in other ways, but I think when I was in structured systems, give me some guidelines. Let me like, okay, I can kill it in school. I can kill it in the workforce. Give it to me and I will kill it. But something about entrepreneurship felt so vulnerable. It felt so vulnerable and I hated it. And I don't think that I ever thought about myself as being somebody who didn't like being vulnerable. And I was like, I don't want to fail. I don't want to look dumb. I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm talking about. And so it just felt really hard. And so I just remember at the time I was part of different coaching groups that I had invested in where I paid $2,000 to buy this program, join this course. They had a Facebook group. I was all up in there. I went to an entrepreneurial event. So early on in my career or my business, I met a lot of people. And I just remember at the time being like, is it just me? So I was literally going into Facebook groups from the programs that I had joined or the events that I had gone to into the Facebook groups, just being like, is anybody else here like a daughter of immigrants? The only reason why I said that and not just like, hey, is anybody else like struggling with confidence in business was because I knew it, like in my head that I was playing out these roles in my mind of who I needed to be in order to be like successful and all of that. So I just started talking to more daughters of immigrants. I remember like 2019, I probably had like 10 to 15 like calls just with daughters of immigrants who raised their hand and were like, yeah, like this is me. And so I just wanted to know whether it was just me. And so funny, I had been pining over what is my niche going to be and all of this before I ever landed a client, and it found me and it just found me. And so after that, I just really started to speak to the first gen experience. I honestly think that me speaking so strongly to first gen when I first started is part of why I had a 6-figure business the first year. But I really, even though I attracted different types of clients, I was never afraid to speak directly to my people. And I've noticed that as I did this essentially like market research and just talking to my people, that it wasn't just me. There were similar patterns across like daughters of immigrants, even from different countries of origin. Like right now, for example, my clients in reclamation, they have like families that are from India, like Korea, the Philippines, China, Mexico, Guatemala, Puerto Rico, Peru, like all over, right? And I've coached daughters of immigrants from like Haiti, Dominican Republic, all the things. And I say this when I say daughters of immigrants, I truly mean like I coach women from all over. And there are a lot of dynamics that are unique to cultures, like cultural specific things, but there are also a lot of common threads. With that, I wanted to just share observations that I have coached, that I've experienced, I have coached my clients through that have to do with just patterns that are very daughter of immigrant specific. And this is why daughters of immigrants need to be mentored differently with these things in mind, because when you aren't able to understand where this came from, you make it your fault and you carry it and you see it as almost being like a personality trait versus a pattern or a protective mechanism that we can then, once you see it as what it is, as just a pattern or a protective mechanism that served a previous generation, then you're able to have more compassion for yourself and be like, oh, I can release this. Like I release this now. To dive in. This is essentially all about how being a daughter of immigrant affects how you show up to entrepreneurship and affects how you show up to just more visibility in general. So this could also apply if you are in a job that is just requires you to be a lot more visible in your career, which is why so many of us struggle. I want us to get past that. Like I want us to make more money. I want us to have more visibility. I want us to be on more microphones. I want us to have more influence, right? So this is all what it's about. Number one is that as a daughter of immigrants, you are still figuring out who you are, even as an adult. And the reason for this is that daughters of immigrant families, typically we were raised that to believe that like we are a reflection of our family, not an individual. Right. So like we are our family's pride or we are our family's shame or like whatever that is. Right. Like for example, things like enmeshment are very common in immigrant families, like to where everybody's in your business, your tias and everybody else is all up in your stuff because it's like a family affair. And so you grow up being like, what's my family going to say? Because it's a very real thing, right? We also grow up, so again, about like why you're still figuring out who you are as an adult, because you're so externally focused on other people's perceptions or your family's perceptions or your parents' perceptions, is that we also grow up wanting to make our parents' sacrifices worth it, right? So we're not even looking at what we want and who we are from our own lens. We're thinking like, what will be a payback for them? What will be a marker of success for them? So like guilt is huge. We're motivated by guilt, right? Therefore, many of us as business owners, as leaders, are still separating who we were told we needed to be in order to be valuable, acceptable, worthy of praise versus who we really are. It's who are you if you didn't describe yourself as who you were for someone else? Like, how would you even answer that question, right? The concept that you could even be an individual with your own personality is honestly even wild. Even me now as a parent, I realize like how much of my daughter is an individual person with very different personality traits and stuff from me, but it's only because I'm able to hold space for her to figure out who she is versus me telling her who she should be and what's acceptable and all of that. And kids learn those cues really quickly. And as a result of you not knowing who you are and like really shaping yourself to other people's expectations, is that we as entrepreneurs or as leaders fall into the trap of performing when we have a business. We fall into the trap of performing and anticipating what do others find acceptable and molding ourselves to that. We also often feel guilt for not choosing the path that we think would have made our parents proud. Because again, externally focused, other people's perceptions focused. So we never got to ask ourselves those deeper questions of who we are, because if who you are is not valuable because no one ever told you that it was, it's only other people's perceptions. And so what happens is once you have more eyes on you, whether it's through your business or whether it's through your career, you will start to freeze up. You'll start to think you can't be yourself anymore. You'll start to just like hyper scan the room for what it is that they are thinking and wanting. And this is why this is so important and why we need to be mentored differently, because we did not have that space to explore who we are as individual people growing up. So therefore, the trap to people please, the trap to perform, the trap to mold yourself is present, especially, like I said, as you have more eyes on you. So number one, you're still figuring out who you are as an adult. Another is that of how daughters of immigrants need to be mentored differently is because the financial investments and the inconsistent income that is part of growing a business feels like there's an actual threat to your body and feels like you're going to go into shutdown. So essentially, our relationship with money affects us as entrepreneurs. Our relationship with money affects us as leaders. I say especially this is more specific to entrepreneurship because of the financial risk, investment, all of that's involved. So therefore, what happens of what I see with daughters of immigrants who are entrepreneurs is whenever there's like sales dips or whatever, there's like a knee-jerk reaction, right? Where it's just, oh no, I need to just pause everything because I don't want to be poor again. I don't want to be broke again. A lot of us have actual memories of watching our parents struggle or us struggling and not having money, right? There's little stories here that nobody would know unless they were a daughter of immigrants. I didn't personally experience this, but these are just things that have come up in coaching, right? So things like even the way that having different like bank accounts for different things in business. Like I've had clients who are like, no, I was used to moving money around from one account to another and like kind of juggling and just hoping things didn't bounce because we never had enough. So it's just even things like that, like watching your balance get below a certain amount can be super, super triggering. Even if you have savings somewhere else, even if you have something somewhere else, like getting an overdraft notification, anything like that can feel like you're broke again, even if you have money somewhere else. So those are things that are just very normal as a daughter of immigrants. Also, just some daughters of immigrants had to literally answer calls from bill collectors for their parents because their parents didn't speak English, right? So just the money scarcity and like the like not having enough and just being really worried is just very present for us. Another thing of just money scarcity, right? Money scarcity coming from knowing that our parents didn't have money, hearing them audibly worry about money. And so we don't ask them. We would never ask them for stuff because we know they didn't have it. And then as an adult, you're like, I can't ask for what I want because I'm used to people not being able to give it to me. So it's just like, you're just aware that, or at least I grew up with like money is hard to earn and it's hard to keep and life is expensive and you better watch it. All of that is a lot of what like many of us grew up with. So here's the thing is like financial scarcity is not just like a mindset. It's not just like, this is just your mindset. Like, what's wrong with you? Fix it. It's like an actual reality that we are recovering from that many of our parents and ancestors were like affected by for generations. I'd say there's mindset. Yes. I guess that's the word to describe it. But it actually is like learning a new level of safety after very real circumstances, right? And the reason that daughters of immigrants are affected by this is because for many of us, like immigration, when our parents immigrated, it typically wasn't because they had a plethora of options and money where they were. Not always. Sometimes, yes. It's typically because they lacked, like they didn't have the opportunities, they didn't have stability. And so they immigrated to get more financial stability and or more options, right? And so when you are one generation removed from not having enough, of course, you are going to feel like it is so close. It's just on the other side of the door. It's one bad decision away. And everything feels very final and very big and very like imminent. And so that's why in business, when you actually have to invest and you have like business expenses and or your income goes up and down, it actually can feel like it's the end of the world, even though your mind actually knows, but like your body is going to react like it's in danger. And that is so real. And I think about like how in a coaching space, just holding space for the reality of that will help you feel more safe in itself because you won't feel like, oh, I just have money scarcity. It's no, you actually did come from insufficiency. And you witnessed it and possibly experienced it yourself. And now you are growing a business, which actually triggers those things because of the up and down in business income, which is an absolute reality in any business owner, right? Inconsistent income, and the fact that it costs money to run a business. So like those two things alone are going to feel super scary. That's the other, I wanted to mention that because it isn't just your fault. Like it's not just in your head, right? So 2 is really just the feeling of financial scarcity that comes from very real circumstances. Number 3 is for many of us, not everyone, but for many of you, you are your parents' retirement plan. And that puts tremendous pressure on you as a business owner because you feel like you don't just have to make it for you, you have to make it for them. And I think that just holding space for it's not just like when you have a child, because then I feel, okay, when you have a child, it's like, of course you have to take care of them. I'm a single parent, right? I have to take care of my child. Thankfully, my parents like paid off their house and stuff like that. But I know for many of my clients, like their parents are not okay. And they have so much pressure because they're like, oh my gosh, like my parents, some of them, they just don't have enough. And so like they're giving their parents money like right now as they're trying to grow their business. And it's really hard for them, And so I just think that's another thing. It's so beautiful and it's so honorable. And I also see you if you are in that position of feeling like the weight of making sure that they're okay is on your shoulders. And that is something that deserves all the space in the world to be held for that. And I wouldn't just tell you, they're your parents, they need to fend for themselves. People who don't understand that dynamic might tell you that. And it's just, listen, there's a middle ground there where you take care of yourself. And you also can figure out what does support look like for your parent. That's another one, is being your parent's retirement plan is a very daughter of immigrant specific experience that affects your experience as an entrepreneur. Another is that standing out and being seen can feel very difficult for us in particular. Therefore, your marketing feels difficult because many of that is just, and maybe it's not even always showing your face, but it's just like being seen and heard. And what sometimes happens is like, entrepreneurs will start to pull back on their growth once they get more attention, like then they feel safe to receive. So again, I speak a lot to like ceilings and caps that we have that have to do with like our capacity and our sense of safety as daughters of immigrants, right? And I want us to be able to safely move through that so that we can create more, receive more, right? And so the reason that being seen feels really hard is because for many of us, like being seen as kids generally wasn't good. It's usually you were doing something bad. Like attention was like, you're getting in trouble, right? We weren't getting attention like praise for the most part. Like, I don't know about y'all, but I don't hear a lot of like praise stories from daughters of immigrants growing up. It's just if you did a good job, they might be like, yeah, that's good. That's what you're supposed to do, right? And so a lot of what we're doing is like, we didn't get a lot of attention that was like validation. And so it's hard to be seen when you don't know how to validate yourself. And you don't know how to validate yourself if nobody ever validated you. And you as a child needed to be validated like 50 times a day. Like I catch myself as a mom how much I validate my daughter, where I'm like, oh yeah, that's so hard, or oh, that makes sense, or oh, that's such a good job, or oh, I see that you did this. And like when you didn't get that, then you go and you do scary shit. And the whole time you're like, wait, am I doing a good job? Should I really have said that? Is that enough? Do they even care? That's your internal dialogue because you didn't receive the validation that a healthy childhood is supposed to receive. And this is not a knock on our parents. They didn't get that either. Like they didn't get it. They don't know what that is, right? Of course, like it's going to feel super vulnerable because the whole time you're not going to be telling yourself like, great job, self, because that's just not like that's not your internal dialogue, right? Okay. And if you are being seen, you're probably telling yourself it needs to be perfect. It needs to be the best. I need to blow people's mind. I can't make a mistake, right? Which is also why being seen is not just hard for us, but especially hard for us if your self-belief is low. In any given point, you're just like, I don't believe in myself. I don't feel like I've been doing well. So I'm just not gonna market, or I'm not gonna show myself because like, I feel like people are gonna see it and like, I can't do it. And so that's just so hard because growing a business, it really requires you actually learning the skill of validation so that you can move through difficult emotions. And a lot of that is created not just through coaching, but it's also created in community because we have to have validation given to us in order for us to give it to ourselves. So somebody has to validate you. They put a drop in the bucket, then you put a drop in the bucket. So all of this just expands your sense of safety to be like, I'm not going to die. It's okay. I have something of value to share, even if I personally don't feel good about myself today, right? This is just huge. And I wanted to just validate that as well. Because again, being seen as a daughter of immigrants typically didn't come from like you doing good stuff. It was usually like you were doing something bad. And if you did something, you better do it perfectly, right? So standing out and being seen can feel exceptionally difficult. Another is that we don't feel safe to feel the emotions that are required of business. Business requires you feeling emotions like ups and downs, holding space, processing them, all of that. Therefore, you will suppress your emotions or try to action your way out of the emotion, either through self-sabotage, just stopping what you're doing on one end, you're like, stop, or by taking more action so that you don't feel the negative emotion, right? Or like the vulnerable emotion. So if you feel fear of rejection, you're anticipating being rejected, you're either going to self-sabotage and just not do it and say you don't want to do it, or you don't want to do it anyway, or it wasn't going to work out anyway, or you'll overaction to prevent the fear of rejection, right? Because you don't want to be rejected or whatever. So you'll just burn out on the other end. So one end is you stop everything self-sabotage. The other is you'll burn out. And so you just have to hold space for the fear, but we'll do anything but be like, wow, some fear is coming up right now. I'm afraid to be rejected. That makes sense. Where have I felt this before? We're not doing that. We're like, anything but feeling that feeling, anything but feeling that feeling. So you'll do everything else but that, right? And this makes sense because growing up, you probably didn't have space held for your emotions by your parents. Your emotions might have been an annoyance or a threat, or you got in trouble for feeling emotions. And that's because for them, they also couldn't feel emotions because people who are in survival mode, emotions aren't helpful to them. They have to suppress them in order to like run, right? So they may not have actually been on the run, but survival mode basically means suppress your emotions and just focus on surviving and what needs to happen. And that's so important because even if you physically weren't like in danger, we grew up with parents who didn't have space held for their emotions because of that same reason. Then they couldn't hold space for our emotions. Therefore, we see emotions as a threat and we suppress them, or we do anything other than feel those emotions. And that's just so hard because like business requires it. It's literally a skill set that you have to learn in order to hold space for your emotions, which is why when I coach my clients, we often will approach mindset work more from a holding space perspective versus a fixing perspective. Because they'll be like, no, but I understand why I'm feeling this. And they're intellectualizing it. They're not feeling it, right? So I teach them how to like be with their emotions, not judge them, validate why they make sense, why it's a form of protection, why they're there. And when you do that, those alarm bells will get quieter. That's just across the board. It'll get quieter. Another thing that's unique to the daughter of immigrant experience is that we are generally daughters of immigrants are very uncomfortable with not being productive. So we cannot sit our asses down by default. We tend to hit a wall sometimes because it just feels like you're so used to working hard. But at a certain point, in order to grow, the space on your calendar actually matters more. That is where you create millions of dollars. You don't do it through action. It's actually sitting with the space. But when you're not comfortable with the space, you're going to take on more work. You're going to take on any amount of calendar space you have. You're going to be like, no, but I need to do more. I need to do more, market more, or sell more, or take on more clients. And everything's going to feel like more. So you have to get comfortable with space and not feeling productive in the conventional sense that you're used to, right? And with that, it makes sense as well because this is what we were modeled and what we saw. If you think about you having a mom that cannot sit down, for many of us, we'll talk about our moms and we're like, my mom is always busy. She's always working. She's always doing something. She's buzzing around the house. That's like literally like a nervous system response, right? Of just like being on the go. So that's another thing is like having a mentor that understands that you have no problem oftentimes like executing or working hard or implementing or whatever. Sometimes you do, but it's also that you will have to redefine your relationship with productivity and like what is productive, redefine your relationship with calendar space, redefine your relationship with getting things done, whatever that is, if you're a daughter of immigrants, because it was what you were modeled. So you're not going to feel safe and you may reactively fill your time with busy work as opposed to the things that are actually going to create more money, more opportunities, And if you can see that, I can see that in my clients, which is why even the ones that are already like past six figures, in order to get into like multiple six figures, that is where that transition happens, because then you just want to fill your books with like clients and fill it with just more stuff, that they will resist things like me saying you need to take client facing delivery off of your calendar for 1 or 2 days a week. One day maybe is you getting coached. Another day is just you working on your business and integrating and making decisions. Maybe 1 or 2 days is serving your clients, right? And they will resist that. But I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't make it a problem. And we will just bring that to their attention of like why that space feels so uncomfortable. And then they're like, I don't like having stuff like not on my calendar, because they're just so used to showing up to work that now we have to like, in a way, like redefine like what happens during that time. Like thinking time becomes important, implementing, integrating, thinking about what you want to ask for coaching on, all of that becomes super important. And I can say that because I've gone through it, because I've coached on it. Another thing is that's very unique to the daughter of immigrant entrepreneur experience is like you have very unrealistic expectations of yourself because of what you were exposed to growing up. So thinking about, we didn't grow up with like age appropriate expectations. We had to grow up, many of us, like very quickly. And that's because our parents didn't either. They didn't have carefree, healthy childhoods where they got to just be innocent and play and have fun and, you know, all of that. Like they also had to grow up quickly. And so I think they just thought that was just like normal, right? Like you grow up and you're just expected to act a lot older than you are. Some of us, especially if you're the eldest, you take care of like your younger siblings and all of that. And so what kind of like winds up happening is like you just are very hard on yourself. And that worked for a long time, is being hard on yourself, because what you were doing was saying, I'm going to be hard on myself first so that someone else can't be hard on me. I'm just going to scan all of my own behavior and hold myself to the standard. And that's obviously in business, like you just having unrealistic expectations of like how things should go, and you should always be winning, and you shouldn't make any mistakes, and like you should never, you know, get no on a sales call, or like all these things, like you just really hold it against yourself. And it's something that when you draw attention to it, it's just, are you actually doing a bad job, or are you just using the inner critic against yourself because this is who you're used to listening to? And what I find is that this will allow you to grow to a certain point. You might actually grow maybe a six-figure business by listening to your inner critic, but beyond that, being hard on yourself either burns you out, or you will succeed through that inner critic, but you will actually be afraid to repeat it, because you'll be like, oh my gosh, I got through that launch, but like I can't imagine doing that again because that was horrible. And this is where I'll get clients who will want to change their whole business model, but I have to get to the root of it, because they'll say like, I don't want to spend all my time like marketing on social media, and like social media is just this. And I'm just like, is it social media? Is it launching? Is it these things? Or is it just your relationship with yourself while you were being on them? And then they'll tell me like, well, I want to like land corporate contracts now. I want to do that because then I don't have to market. And I'm like, whatever your relationship is to the thing is going to follow you wherever you go if we don't understand your relationship with yourself while you're doing it. And as a coach for Daughters of Immigrants, I'm able to just speed past and really see where some of these connections are, because that's where true freedom is and where you can access more of yourself. Another thing that's a pattern is like, Daughters of Immigrants, we tend to just be very good at scanning the room, and we're very hypervigilant. We'll look at people's faces, we'll look at their body language, all of that, because that's just, for some of us, that's just the way you had to grow up, because you didn't have necessarily like parents that were very emotionally aware or emotionally mature. So you have to then do the anticipation and the scanning. And so that happens where in business, you then become overly reactive, and you start to and try to like anticipate how people are going to respond to you and just overreact. And you start to make decisions based on what you think other people's thoughts or actions will be versus like what they actually are. And this is also where people stop doing like what was working because of that, like reactivity. And it's because it's just really hard, because you are like, you're being hyper vigilant, right? So That's another pattern. And I think just when we draw attention to not everything that feels like a threat is actually a threat, when you hold space for it, the alarm will continue to go off to say, this isn't going to work, or people are going to criticize me, or like I'm doing the wrong thing, whatever. And eventually you can listen to the alarm go off, but not actually run out of the building. It's almost like if a fire alarm is going off and you know that they're just testing it, then you won't pick up all your shit and run out of the house. That's really a lot of what I do as a coach, is normalize the alarm bells, attribute the alarm bell to the appropriate cause so we can observe the alarm bell and not run out of the house. And that's what allows you to hold more eyes, more clients, more revenue, more all the things, is observing the alarm bell. And finally, this is it's beautiful, but a little sad, because I've seen this in my clients who already are at the multiple six-figure level, is that sometimes when you do succeed, it's going to feel heavy, and that's okay. And the reason that it feels heavy is because when you think about what it requires for you to grow that business, you've gone through a lot, right? You've gone through probably healing, you've gone through a lot of things, and not everyone is going to understand that ever, especially your family sometimes, right? And so what will wind up happening is you have the money coming in, you have more options. Like I had somebody in the mastermind recently who went on a trip, and it felt very heavy for her because she said, I want to go on this trip by myself, but then I feel like I should take my parents with me because I know that they won't go and they can't do this sort of stuff for themselves and they're getting old. And so many people on the call like held space and cried. And they were like, no, I feel the same way, like with my little sisters, and just all of this where they just feel like guilty and selfish in a way because like they're making the money now and they have the options, but yet they feel like they need to, they're like, should I be giving it back? Should I be taking them with me on everything? And it's hard because in a way, it's like you feel like they don't know you anymore because you know who you are and maybe they know their version of you. Like they know who they thought you were when you were a kid, but you're this different person. And it's hard because we want things for our parents and we want things for our family. But sometimes it's really hard to accept that they may not want those things for themselves, or they may not want to change, even though they may be sitting in problems that you see solutions to. Like you as an entrepreneur are going to go through all these iterations of healing and problem solving that you're going to just see where they're at. And you're like, oh my gosh, if they just did this, if they just went to therapy. I can't count the number of people who wish their parents went to therapy and they did these certain things with their money so that they would be okay, and they just don't want to do it. And it's hard because even when you succeed, it is so normal to feel guilt that you can't save them all. You want to bring them with you. And maybe you feel a little bit of guilt because even though you succeeded, you didn't do it in the way that they envisioned. And that's just such a normal thing as well. And so if you see yourself in any of these, I am just sending you so much love. You are literally healing generations through what you are doing. I truly believe and know, like it has been proven, like we carry things that are not even ours. We're carrying stuff that like our moms carried from our grandmas, who carried from our great grandmas. Like it really is something that we are holding. And the reason that it comes up so deeply in entrepreneurship is because it honestly requires us to be our most empowered, authentic selves. And so there's so much like peeling away that happens when you grow a business. And so just be compassionate with yourself because you're doing something that is so much bigger than you. And if you resonated with this episode, just know like you are not alone. I can absolutely attest to that. I coach so many daughters of immigrants. Like I said, this is where this all came from. This isn't just like my own story. And know that you are a walking miracle. If you were doing anything other than the path you were set up to walk, playing it safe, doing what was expected of you, being who other people expected you to be, if you're doing anything but that, you are a walking miracle. And just celebrate yourself and recognize you're doing hard shit and that things take time. If you are a certain way your entire life and you're conditioned a certain way, it's not going to just happen that you're going to be a different person, right? And so I just think like you're just in this journey of really reclaiming who you are, your voice, your identity, your sense of self, all of this, and this takes time. And that also takes support. I could not be here without my coaches, without somatic therapy, without my community. Absolutely, I am a byproduct of so many people who I allow to help me day in, day out, year after year. And so if this is you, I also invite you to receive support. I would love to work with you. In fact, I have added new ways to work with me privately. From 3 months to 6 months, I have options that are between monthly calls, bi-weekly calls, all the things. I can help you decide what makes the most sense. And as a mentor, as a coach, I'm not just limited to helping you with your business. I am going to be your mentor to help you through whatever it is that you need. And it can be multiple things at once. So whether you're going through a life pivot, you're going through something in your life while you're trying to grow your business, you are having a baby, you are thinking of quitting your job, you are getting used to having more visibility, you want to start your business, all the things. I've coached on literally all of it. The most important thing that is the common thread is that I understand the first gen experience. And I understand that the things that we struggle with in business are not just limited to business. I'm able to take a zoom out and look at you, look at your life, look at your conditioning, look at what's happening, and help to figure out like, what is it that needs to be essentially like rewired, or just have space held for those things so that you actually can stop using them against yourself. And I couldn't have done what I've done in growing a 7-figure brand as a single parent with all this generational trauma if I didn't also go through this myself. In that sense, I'm the best person to be able to see this because I've worked through it myself and helped so many other daughters of immigrants do the same. So I hope this episode helped. Please reach out. Let me know if you have questions. I'd love to hear even just like what part of this resonated with you. And I hope to work with you soon. All right. I will talk to y'all soon, and I will see you next week.